Nobody wanted to challenge the ruthless billionaire CEO until the black maid's husband stood tall. The city at night looked like a sky that had fallen to the ground. Lights blinked like stars. Cars hissed on wet roads. Far above, in a glass tower that cut through the clouds, there was a penthouse that felt colder than ice. Inside it, every surface shined. Every chair sat perfectly. Every rug had straight lines like rulers. People who worked there moved with soft feet and lowered eyes. They had learned the rule that sat heavier than the marble floor: be unseen, be unheard, and never defy the man who owned the sky. His name was Richard Blackwell. He ran a tech empire. His smile was a knife. His words felt like walls. People said he had no heart. They said he could destroy anyone with one call. And on the evening when rain drew silver lines on the glass, a thing happened that no one in that tower imagined. A maid named Elena Brooks had finished cleaning the long glass table. She wanted to go home. Her husband, David, had come to pick her up. He was simple. He wore boots with dirt from a long day. He had hands that told stories of honest work. He had a father's voice in his head that said, "There are moments to be quiet and moments to stand your ground. A good man knows the difference." When Richard walked out of the private elevator, his shoes hit the marble like gunshots. He asked, "Did you clean this table?" Elena said, "Yes, sir." Then he tilted his cup. Coffee spilled like a dark river over the glass, down to the pale rug. Elena stared. Her lips shook. Had she done something wrong? The stain spread like a wound. Richard looked pleased. "Seems you missed a spot," he said. The room froze. The staff at the edges held their breath. And David, who had planned to wait quietly at the door, felt the fire in his chest grow. He stepped in front of his wife. He said, clear and steady, "You should apologize." For the first time in years, the glass palace heard something new. Not silence, not fear. It heard a voice that did not bow. Richard's head turned slow like a hawk. He stared at David's face as if measuring a stranger who did not know the rules. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" he asked. David did not blink. "I know what I saw," he said. "You humiliated my wife for no reason." The air became heavy. Even the rain seemed to listen. Elena tugged at David's sleeve. "Please," she whispered. "Don't." But David's feet would not move. His father's voice would not let him. A security chief named Omar Patel stepped closer, his hand near his radio. He looked at Richard, waiting for a signal. A senior housekeeper, Martha Griggs, pressed a palm to her mouth. She had seen many people lose jobs for less. She had not seen anyone tell Richard Blackwell to say sorry. The billionaire took one step forward. His suit made no sound. He said, soft as a knife, "You think I should apologize to the help?" The words were small but sharp. "Yes," David said, "because kindness costs nothing." Richard's smile did not reach his eyes. "Security," he said without looking away. "Escort this man off my property." Omar nodded. 2 guards came. Elena cried, "No, please, he only came to pick me." Richard raised a hand. "Not another word," he said. David lifted his palms. "We are leaving now," he told the guards, "but this is wrong." He looked at Richard one last time. Even kings fall if they stand on the wrong thing. The guards led him to the elevator. The doors closed with a sigh. The room stayed silent. Elena bent to blot the coffee like a person trying to wipe away a nightmare. Richard turned his back to the window again. The city blinked. The sky felt lower. Down in the lobby, the air smelled like rubber and rain. David stood outside the revolving doors, hands in his pockets, breathing hard. He wanted to punch something. He wanted to cry. He wanted to protect his wife and also keep her job because rent is made of numbers that do not care about feelings. He remembered his father, Walter Brooks, a soldier with a chest of faded ribbons. When David was 10, a bus driver had shouted at a woman who spoke little English. The driver made fun of her words. Walter had stepped on and said, "Respect is a basic right." The driver had gone red and angry, but he had stopped. That memory pulled David back to the present like a tight rope. He stared at the building that ate the sky. That man inside, Richard, thought money meant power over souls. But he would learn something. He would learn there are people who do not break. A voice pulled David from his thoughts. "You're her husband, aren't you?" It was Omar, the security chief. He had followed to the lobby. He looked tired, like someone who had carried many orders he did not like. "She'll be down in a minute," Omar said. "She's not in trouble." David nodded, still angry. "Why does he do that?" Omar studied the rain. "Control," he said. "He learned it young. Keeps him from feeling small." David frowned. "You know him well." "I know his fear," Omar said quietly. "It's loud." Before David could ask, the elevator opened. Elena rushed out and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm sorry," she said into his coat. "You could lose your work because of me." David held her and shook his head. "No, he did wrong. Not you." Omar watched them for a second, then said, "If you're wise, you won't come back here." David looked him in the eye. "If I'm wise, I will come back with truth." The next day, the tower was a hive with whispers buzzing under the ceiling vents. Word had spread. A husband had told Richard Blackwell to apologize. Some staff were afraid. Some were excited, like kids who saw a small crack in a wall. Elena kept her head down. She cleaned in quiet patterns that calmed her breathing. Her friend, a young server named Ava Lynn, nudged her in the pantry. "He'll forget soon," Ava said. "He forgets people. He only remembers power." Elena sighed. "I don't want trouble," she said. "I want a safe place to work. I want my mother's medicines paid. I want a life that does not shake." Ava squeezed her fingers. "You deserve that." Across the floor, Richard walked with two senior executives and the board chair, Lyle Harrington. They talked about a new product that would change how homes used screens. They talked about stocks like clouds you could hold. Richard was calm, dangerous calm, but inside him something had moved. He kept seeing the husband's eyes. Steady, unafraid. It was like looking into a mirror he had not asked for. That night, alone in his office with the city scratching at the glass, a sound rose from the past. It was thin and sharp, like a child crying behind a door. He closed his eyes. He saw a long hallway with dark wood. He saw a man who never said sorry. He saw a boy standing straight because sitting meant weakness. Richard opened his eyes. He did not like the feeling. Feelings were traps. This was the first turning point. The moment a small act of dignity created a crack in a wall that looked unbreakable. 2 days later, David finished his shift at the construction site early. He had spent the morning pouring concrete for a school gym. The work was heavy, but it made sense. Straight lines, honest edges. You could see what you built. He got a message from Elena. "I am okay. Please don't come today." He read it twice. He felt the old push and pull. Protect her. Do not risk her job. But also, do not let fear teach you how to live. He turned the phone in his hand. Then he walked to the bus stop, then to the tower, and told the receptionist he wanted to speak to Human Resources. His voice was calm. His back was straight. The receptionist blinked and said, "Do you have an appointment?" He said, "No, but I have a right to be heard." The HR director, Noura Halim, met him in a small office on floor 12. She wore a quiet scarf and had kind eyes. "You must be Elena's husband," Noura said, motioning to a chair. "I am," David said. "I want to file a complaint." Noura folded her hands. "About Mr. Blackwell?" "About humiliation," David said. He told her what had happened. He added no extra fire. He spoke like a carpenter reading a plan. Clear, exact. Noura took notes. Her pen hesitated only once. "I believe you," she said at last. "But I must be honest. Very few people who file complaints against him keep their jobs." David nodded. "I understand. I am not here to burn anything down. I am here to set something right." Noura looked at him for a long second, then nodded back. "I will document this," she said. "And I will ask to open a review." She glanced at the door and lowered her voice. "What you did was brave. Even if nothing changes, it matters." He thanked her. When he left, the receptionist watched him go with a soft, surprised face. People did not come here to speak truth. They came here to keep quiet. The elevator doors closed like heavy eyelids. On the top floor, cameras blinked in tiny red dots. The review request moved through the building like a ghost. It touched screens and sparked small warnings. It reached a desk with a glass award that said, "Most Respected Leader." The person at that desk was the board chair, Lyle. He read Noura's note and frowned. Richard had made him rich. But he had also made him tired. Investors loved the profits, but they were starting to ask about lawsuits, about videos of workers crying, about storms that might one day crash the ship. Lyle called Richard into a meeting. The room had tall plants and bottled water with square shoulders. Richard entered with a face that said the weather would be whatever he wanted. Lyle cleared his throat. "There's a complaint about your conduct with a housekeeper," he said. "I have no time for gossip," Richard answered. "We have a launch next month. This is not gossip." Lyle slid a paper across. "Her husband says you forced her to clean a mess you made to shame her." Richard's jaw moved in a small, slow grind. "And," Lyle said, "the optics aren't good." Richard laughed once, quiet but sharp. "Optics. My company keeps this city alive. Optics follow revenue." Lyle tapped the paper. "We will need to address it." Richard leaned back. He measured the older man. Then he smiled. "Fine, I'll handle it." He stood. "In my way." That night he called a meeting of the service staff. Elena stood in the back near a shelf with polished silver bowls. Her hands were damp. Ava stood beside her. Omar stood near a door, silent as a shadow. Martha, the elder housekeeper, held a clipboard in front of her like a shield. Richard entered and faced the group. "I value precision," he said. "I value excellence. I don't value drama." He let the words hang. "This house runs because of standards. Anyone who cannot meet them should find elsewhere to work." He paused. His eyes landed on Elena, steady and cold. "That is all." He turned to go. David, who had quietly stepped into the door at the far end with permission from Noura, felt his heart kick. He had not known there would be a staff meeting. He had only come to pick up Elena the way he used to. But when he saw Richard looking at her like a problem to be removed, he felt that rope pull again. He stepped forward, his boots dull against the marble. "You called that a meeting," he said. The room gasped. No one was supposed to speak after Richard. The billionaire turned, annoyed. "You again," he said. "This is a workplace, not a public square." David nodded. "Then let us talk like workers. My wife is one. You say you value excellence. She gives you excellence. What do you give her?" Richard's mouth twitched. "A job," he said. "A paycheck. A chance to be near greatness." "Greatness does not spill coffee and call it a test," David replied. A small, shocked laugh rose from the back. It died quickly. Richard stepped close. They were almost nose to nose, except Richard was taller and his suit smelled like an expensive store. David smelled like dust and soap. "You think you know who I am?" Richard whispered. "You're a man who learned that making others small makes you feel big," David said. "But that is a trick. It never lasts." Richard's eyes flashed. "Get out before I file a restraining order." David smiled sadly. "File paper. It will not cover your shame." Omar moved between them then. "Enough," he said quietly. "Everyone, please go back to your stations." The staff scattered like sparrows. Elena pulled David away by the sleeve. Her hands shook so hard her keys chimed. "You're going to get me fired," she whispered through tears. David cupped her face. "No," he said. "He will not decide our worth." She took a breath that trembled like a leaf. "Then I must decide it myself," she said. "I quit." This was the second turning point. Elena's voice, which had been quiet for years, stood up with its own legs. Silence followed her words. It hung over the room. Richard blinked. He had expected anger from the husband. He had not expected the maid to throw down her fear like a coat. "You quit?" he said, as if the word was in a language he did not speak. Elena nodded. Her chin lifted a little. "I will not be your practice target." The room had corners you could hide in. But now it had a center. Elena, breathing, trembling, choosing. Richard laughed in disbelief. "You think you can just walk out?" Elena looked over at Ava. "Will you help me pack my locker?" Ava nodded at once, eyes wet. "Of course." Richard turned to Omar. "Stop her." Omar did not move. He looked at Elena, at David, at the floor. Then he looked at Richard and shook his head once. "She has the right," he said. Richard's jaw clenched. "You're all losing your minds," he said. He looked at Elena again. "You think you will find work this good? Benefits like this? The world is not a soft place." Elena's eyes were steady now. "I know," she said. "I live in that world every day." She took David's hand. "Let's go." They walked out together. The elevator doors closed. Richard stood in the echo of his own voice. Outside, rain hammered the city like a million little truths. The days that followed were hard. Elena woke before dawn to scroll job postings on an old phone with a cracked corner. She sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and a list of medicines for her mother. The numbers looked like tall walls. David went to work early and came home late with sawdust in his hair. He counted coins in a jar. He smiled for Elena in a way that tried to say, "We will be okay," and sometimes said, "I am scared too." They sold a TV. They let a bill wait. They did not let go of each other. One afternoon, a call came from a small hotel across town. The manager, Mrs. Ortega, had heard about Elena from a cousin who worked as a server in the tower. "We're not fancy," she said on the phone, "but we are kind." Elena started there the next week, cleaning rooms that smelled like lemon and warm sheets. She moved slower at first, her body remembering the fear of being watched by cold eyes. But the new place had laughter in the hall. People said thank you like a simple gift. She went home tired, but her smile reached her cheeks. David saw it and felt his chest loosen. "It's not the same pay," he said one night, counting coins again. "But your soul looks safer." Elena touched his cheek. "You made the first step," she said. "I took the next." He shook his head. "You were the brave one." She smiled. "Maybe we shared the work, but the tower did not forget." A week after Elena left, a video appeared online. It showed a black and white clip from a security camera. The frame was wide. You could see the long glass table. You could see Richard tilt the cup. You could see the dark river of coffee spill onto the rug. You could see Elena's face, small and steady. You could see David step forward and say something you could not hear. The clip had no audio, but it had fire. It spread quickly. People wrote comments like, "Why would a boss do that?" and "Treat workers with respect." Some wrote mean things about Elena because the internet is a place with both light and shadows. But most were on her side. Inside the tower, PR teams ran with papers. Phones rang. Lyle called a crisis meeting. Richard sat at the head of the table, his eyes cold. "We will say it is out of context," he said. "We will say the spill was an accident." Nora, the HR director, said, "It doesn't look like an accident." Richard's stare slid to her. "Then we will fix the look." Lyle rubbed his temples. "We need to show accountability," he said. "Investors are nervous." Richard's jaw pulsed. "Investors like strength," he answered. "They do not like weakness. They do not like leaders who kneel." Nora looked at him and saw, not a monster, not only, but a man trapped in an armor that had grown too tight. She thought of something and wrote it down. Invite him to listen. Even a wall has a door. She did not know if the door would open. The third turning point arrived on a gray morning when the sky looked like steel wool. A letter came to David and Elena's small mailbox. The envelope had heavy paper and a logo that looked like a tower. Inside was a formal sharp-edged note: "Cease and desist from spreading false statements." It was signed by Richard's legal team. It demanded that they stop talking about the event. It suggested they could be sued for harming the company's reputation. Elena's hands shook as she held the letter. "I don't even have a lawyer," she whispered. David took the paper, read it slow, then folded it and set it down like a heavy knife. He felt fear crawl up his spine, and then something else. He remembered Walter again, not as a soldier, but as a dad who once stood in a small school office arguing for a boy's right to read a book the teacher had banned. "The world tries to scare you with size," Walter had said. "But truth is the one thing that does not change size." David looked at Elena. "We will not be silent." "What if we lose?" she asked softly. Then we lose with our heads up, he said. He called Nora. She answered on the second ring. I knew a letter might come, she said. Listen, off the record, there is a board session tomorrow. The public part will be streamed. There is an open question segment. If you come and if you speak, the cameras will see you. The truth will have eyes. David's heart thumped. Will they let us in? Yes, she said. But I didn't say this, okay? He promised. When he hung up, his hands trembled. He looked at Elena. We can stand in the light, he said. Are you with me? She swallowed, fear and courage fighting in her throat. Then she nodded. Together. The next day, they dressed like people going to a wedding with no music. Elena wore a blue dress that hugged her shoulders. She braided her hair with calm hands. David wore a clean shirt and the old belt his father had given him. They took the bus. They sat in silence, fingers laced. When they walked into the company auditorium, the room felt like a spaceship. Lights hung in rings. Cameras blinked. Reporters whispered like rain. On stage, board members sat behind a long table, each with a name card. Richard was in the center. He wore a dark suit and a face like glass. Lyle tapped a microphone. Welcome to our quarterly meeting, he said. We'll begin with remarks and then questions. The remarks were numbers and charts and words like synergy and market share. David's mind wandered. He looked at Elena, who stared at the stage with quiet strength. He squeezed her hand. Then the question part began. People lined up at microphones. Some asked about products. Some asked about profits. Then David stood and walked to a microphone in the back. The camera found him like a spotlight. He cleared his throat. His voice wanted to shake, but he held it with both hands. My name is David Brooks, he said. My wife worked in your tower as a maid. Last week, Mr. Blackwell spilled coffee on a glass table on purpose, then on a rug, and used that mess to shame her. He did it because he could. He did not need to. He did not say sorry. We were told to be quiet. We won't. The room made a long sound like a deep breath. Lyle looked uneasy. Richard's eyes went hard. He leaned to his mic. This is not the place for personal grievances, he said. David nodded. Maybe this is exactly the place. The world sees your numbers. They should also see your heart. A reporter shouted, Is there video? David said, Yes, it's online, but it has no sound. Only we have the sound. He pointed to his chest. It is here. The reporter turned to Richard. Do you deny it? Richard said. It is out of context. What is the context? David asked softly, for making a person feel small. The room quieted so much you could hear someone breathe 3 rows up. For the first time, Richard seemed to hesitate. He opened his mouth and then closed it, like a man who had always known the next word and suddenly did not. Here came the climb to the climax. You could feel it in your teeth. Nora stepped to a side mic, her HR badge small but bright. Our role is to listen to employees and ensure respect, she said carefully. We have opened an internal review. Lyle leaned to his mic. We appreciate all voices, he said as if reading from a card. Richard straightened and found his power again. This is a smear, he said. We will respond. David did not move. You could respond by saying 2 words, he said. 2 simple words that heal. I'm sorry. The syllables felt like pebbles dropped in a quiet pool. Everyone stared at Richard. He looked at David as if the man had asked him to cut off his own shadow. Inside his chest, something old barked. A memory rose like smoke. He saw a kitchen with a cracked tile. He saw a boy spill a glass. He saw a father's belt. He heard the words, weakness is a disease. He blinked hard. The lights made halos on his vision. When he spoke, his voice was softer, as if it had to pass through a tight space. I don't apologize, he said. I never have. The room murmured like a hive hit with a stick. Lyle leaned back, unhappy but used to this. David nodded once, as if confirming something he had suspected. Elena spoke then, stepping to a second mic. Her voice was quiet but clear. My name is Elena, she said. I cleaned your floors. I made your tables shine. I kept your world neat so you could live like the sky. When you spilled coffee, I felt like a spill too, as if I was not a person anymore but a stain that needed wiping. But I am a person. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am tired of being called a stain. She looked right at Richard. Her eyes were wet but steady. You could be great. Not because you make money, because you treat people right. Say sorry, not to me alone, to everyone you taught to be small. The room was still. Even the cameras seemed to hold their digital breath. Richard stared at Elena as if she had done something impossible, like move a mountain with her hands. He felt a crack in the hard shell he had worn since he was a boy in a house with rules that had no softness. He felt the boy he used to be look at him from inside and ask, "Can we rest now?" He swallowed. He looked at the board, at Lyle, who watched with tight lips, at Nura, who watched with open eyes, at the audience, which looked like many oceans. He could throw back another sharp answer. He could double down and be the man everyone said he was. He could also step through a door he had kept locked so long he had forgotten it existed. "My father taught me never to say sorry," he heard himself say, to his shock and everyone else's. His voice was lower now. "He taught me that power means never admitting a mistake." A ripple moved through the room. He blinked hard again. "I have lived by that. And yes, I spilled the coffee." He exhaled. The air left him slow, like a heavy thing that had waited years to be set down. "I made a person feel small. I did it because I could." His hand tightened on the mic. The boy inside him whispered, "Don't do it. He will hurt you." The man on stage said, "I was wrong." The word landed and echoed. He felt the old belt lift like a shadow and then fade. "I am sorry," he said to Elena. "I am sorry," he said to the room. His eyes flicked to the camera, "and to anyone who has felt the weight of my pride." People gasped. Some clapped on reflex and then stopped, unsure. Lyle stared as if the earth had tilted. Nura closed her eyes for 1 second, like a prayer. David's shoulders dropped. He had not expected to hear those words. He had also not planned what to do if he did. But the story did not end there. A woman stood in the audience, Martha, the senior housekeeper, and said in a shaky voice, "Thank you for saying it. But words are like rain. They help. We also need a roof." Richard nodded as if her truth was a rope thrown to him. "You're right," he said. "We will set a dignity policy for all staff. We will raise pay for service teams. We will add training for leaders, including me." His mouth curved, not into a knife this time, but into a line that tried to be human. "And I will speak to you, Elena, privately. If you want to come back, there will be a place. If you don't, there will be a settlement that honors what you gave." Elena stood very still. David looked at her. Her eyes filled. The room waited. Elena took a breath like someone at the edge of a pool deciding whether to jump. "Thank you," she said. "I don't want to come back. I want to move forward." Richard nodded. "Then move with my help," he said. "We will provide a letter of praise and 3 months' pay." He looked at Lyle. "We will do this now." Lyle raised his brows and then slowly nodded. The cameras caught it all. The internet woke again. The video of the coffee spill found its partner, the video of a man saying sorry for the first time. After the meeting, in a quiet hallway that smelled like lemon and new carpet, Richard waited with hands that did not know where to stay. On his sides, 2 assistants shifted like trees in wind. Nura stood nearby, calm as a lake. Elena and David walked toward them. Their steps were slow. Richard opened his mouth. He closed it. He felt again like that boy in the kitchen, but the room was different. There were no belts here, only people. "I meant it," he said when they reached him. "I will change things." Elena nodded. "If you mean it tomorrow and next week," she said, "then it will be real." Richard gave a tiny smile that hurt like a new stretch. "Hold me to it," he said. He looked at David. "You stood up," he added. "Most men don't," David shrugged. "My father taught me that dignity is not a coat you wear outside. It is skin. You keep it on even in the rain." Richard nodded, eyes bright in a way that surprised him. "I did not have a father like that," he said. David said, "Then you can be that man for someone else." It isn't too late. They parted with a handshake that felt like a small bridge built between two sides that had never thought to connect. Down the hall, Martha watched and smiled with her mouth and her eyes. Ava ran to Elena and hugged her tight enough to make the air pop. Omar leaned against the wall, relief running through his shoulders. Nora exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for years. In the lobby, reporters tried to ask more, but Elena held David's hand and walked past with a quiet strength. Outside, the sky had peeled back to show a little blue. The streets steamed. The city looked new for a minute. In the weeks that followed, news shows argued. Some called Richard's apology a PR trick. Some called it a miracle. Blogs wrote think pieces. Talk shows invited workplace dignity experts. The hotel where Elena worked saw the video and moved her to a supervisor role. "You have leadership," Mrs. Ortega said. "Use it." Elena trained new staff with a gentle voice and clear steps. She taught them to keep their backs safe when lifting, to hold pride in small things, to say no to disrespect. David worked extra hours and started evening classes in project management because he wanted to do more than carry bricks. At home, they sat at the tiny table with tea and talked about money and dreams. Big dreams like saving for a small house with a yard. Small dreams like taking Elena's mother to see the sea one time. Inside the tower, changes came like rain after dry season. Some drops were cold. Some felt warm. A dignity charter went up on every floor. No humiliation. No fear. Respect at all levels. Managers trained. Feedback was asked and answered. Omar, who had said no at the right moment, was promoted to head of a new human care team. Nora led listening sessions where people told small and big truths. Richard met with them, at first stiff as a man wearing a sweater for the first time, then slowly more human. He stumbled. He said awkward things. He also sat in silence and let others speak, which was harder and better. He made mistakes and said the word again. Each time it hurt a little less, like a tight shoe that slowly fits. Lyle grumbled and then admitted the company's numbers did not fall. In fact, some lines went up. People who felt safe worked better. Investors noticed that storms had quieted. The board held its breath less. One afternoon, Richard visited the small hotel where Elena now led a team. He came with no cameras and no press. He asked Mrs. Ortega to show him their break room. It was small and bright. On the wall was a board with index cards. Each card had a staff name and a note. "Thank you for staying late," or "You taught me well today." Richard stood there longer than he knew how to. He asked, "Do you like working here?" Elena said, "I do. It is not perfect. But people try to be kind." He nodded. He said, "I want my tower to feel like this." She said, "Then listen every day." He swallowed and nodded again. He looked human, not a statue. He thanked her and left. Months passed. The world moved on because the world always does. But a thread had been pulled and tied again in a new way. Elena's mother's health grew steadier. David passed his course and got a promotion to site coordinator. He bought a plant for the window. It did not die. On a Sunday, they took Elena's mother to the sea. The waves made a sound like saying yes over and over. The air tasted like salt and hope. They ate sandwiches on a blue blanket and watched the horizon. David said, "Do you think we changed anything?" Elena smiled, slow and sure. "We changed us," she said. And that is always the start. Back in the tower, Richard sat alone in his office as the sun slid down, painting the city gold. He held a photo he had found in a box at home. It showed a boy standing straight in a kitchen with cracked tile. The boy's eyes were trying to be brave. Richard touched the photo and said, low, "It's okay to rest now." He set the photo down and wrote a letter by hand to Elena and David. He wrote about policy changes. He wrote about a new fund for service worker education. He wrote, "Thank you for making me see." He ended with, "I hope to be a better man." He sealed it and sent it. He stared at the city and did a thing he almost never did. He let his shoulders fall. That night, Elena and David read the letter at their small table. The words were careful. The promise was bigger than the paper. David looked up. "Do you believe him?" he asked. Elena thought for a long breath. I believe in the power of being seen, she said. I believe in the strength of standing tall. And I believe people can change if someone is brave enough to go first. David smiled. You went first. Elena shook her head. You did, she said. He laughed. Maybe we walked at the same time. She stood and pulled him into a hug that felt like a home. The plant on the window watched with green leaves. The night held them without fear. Time kept moving. The news found new storms to chase. But inside many workplaces across the city, small posters appeared. Kindness costs nothing. Some workers taped the words to monitors. Some taped them to their hearts. A bus driver paused before he yelled and chose to help. A manager picked up a spilled drink and said, "It's okay," and meant it. A kid watched and learned. The thing about courage is that it is loud in quiet ways. On the anniversary of the board meeting, the tower hosted a community event. There were no speeches. There was music and simple food and doors open to the public. Staff from all levels laughed together in a way that looked strange to old eyes and normal to new ones. Elena and David came, not as employees or protesters, but as guests. Omar waved them in. Noura hugged them like family. Even Lyle shook their hands and said, gruff but kind, "You made us better." Richard was there too, not on a stage but near a table, helping serve cups of tea. He spilled a little. He wiped it with a napkin and chuckled at himself. People saw and did not gasp. They just lived. When the night ended, Richard walked them to the door. He stood with them under the high ceiling and said, "Thank you." Elena said, "Keep going." David said, "We will hold you to it." Richard nodded. "Please do," he said. They stepped out into the city, which shined like a sky you could walk through. Elena squeezed David's hand. He squeezed back. They felt small in a good way, like two people under a big universe that now seemed to smile with both sides of its mouth. At home, before sleep, Elena took a small notebook from the drawer beside the bed. She wrote a single line. "We are not stains. We are stories." She closed the book and turned off the lamp. The room went soft and warm. The city hummed far away. A new day waited with clean hands, and if anyone asks what happened in that glass palace where silence used to be the law, they can say this: a maid named Elena found her voice, a husband named David stood tall, a wall cracked, a man who thought he owned the sky learned to touch the ground, and a company discovered that respect is not a cost. It is the profit that lasts. This is the end of the story called Nobody Wanted to Challenge the Ruthless. Billionaire CEO until the black maid's husband stood tall. And it carries a simple lesson. Power is loud, but dignity is stronger. Fear is heavy, but courage stands up. And sometimes the first sorry is the door to everything good that follows.